I don't know if you noticed, but God of War is based on fictional mythology with fictional characters, but sometimes the fine folks and folkettes at Santa Monica Studio and Ready at Dawn took advantage of the vast history of antiquity and sneakily put them into Kratos' adventures, albeit normally with a God of War-ish twist, that twist being that Kratos shows up and fucks everything up. As a history fan, I really enjoy when historic events are integrated into fictional media, and God of War is no exception. So here is a list of pretty much every historic event and person I could find within the God of War universe. Let's start with the big popular one, the destruction of the Colossus of Rhodes. As I'm sure most of you know, the Colossus was a very real statue in, well, Rhodes, built in honor of the sun god Helios and considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Unfortunately, in 226 BC, an earthquake hit the island and the statue collapsed onto the city. Or so they say, because we all know that in reality it was brought to life by godly power and exploded by a very misbehaving, soon-to-be-fired god of war. As far as the siege goes, Sparta never invaded Rhodes. However, there was a big siege of the island by Antigonus I, the successor of Alexander the Great. Ironically, the Rhodians' victory in that siege is what the Colossus was constructed in celebration of, so the siege and the Colossus being there at the same time could not be possible. But the conquest in God of War 2 is not based on history anyway, so it doesn't really matter. A conquest that is based on history, though, is the bombastic opening of God of War Chains of Olympus. There have been several Persian invasions in ancient Greek history, but the one used to inspire the Battle of Attica is the Battle of Marathon that occurred in 490 BC. Now, the weird thing is, Attica is not a city. It's a region that includes Marathon and Athens, but then Kratos finds himself in Marathon after Helios is abducted, so why would you call it Attica, not Marathon? It doesn't make any sense, and it's pissing me off! The things in the Battle of Attica that are historically accurate include the victory of Greece and the Greek army mostly consisting of Athenian soldiers. Though I'm pretty sure this is just a coincidence and Ready at Dawn didn't think it that far through. What is not as accurate is a giant fire-breathing lizard attacking the city, as far as we know. If we assume that this was actually the Battle of Marathon, then the Persian king we fight would technically be Darius I, the father of Xerxes, yes, the 300 Xerxes. However, the real Darius was never physically present during the battle and died 4 years later for health reasons and not chest to the head reasons. If I'm not mistaken, the only actual historic person we ever definitively see in God of War is Archimedes. In reality, a legendary mathematician and inventor responsible for proving the principle of the lever. Thank you very much. The God of War Archimedes is responsible for constructing the statue of Apollo from Ascension. This, of course, is entirely made up. I don't think Archimedes ever dabbled in architecture like this, but here we are. Naturally, Archimedes never died while constructing a giant statue for the gods. He was killed by a Roman soldier during the siege of his hometown of Syracuse in 212 BC. We actually could have the chance to meet the man in the flesh. The model and even voice lines for a fully alive and well Archimedes exist online.
You see, the god Apollo was born here on Delos. It was he who inspired me to determine the grains of sand in the universe.
But alas, in the final version, we can only enjoy a rotting corpse, joining the serious long tradition of architects dying due to building massive constructions for the gods. Oh well. I really wanted to include something from the Norse games on this list, but unfortunately, pretty much everything in these is based on myths and fables. The closest I could get is the Berserker King Hrolf Kraki being a semi-legendary king. Semi-legendary means that he probably was real, but then there was a bunch of stuff made up about him, so he is barely even historic. I mean, honestly, just look at him. This is the honorable mentions part of the video, not because this is a ranking, it isn't, but because these are historic events and people who are mentioned and not shown. And all these mentions are very honorable, hence the title. In 2018, Kratos mentions knowing a storyteller. He talks about the legendary Greek poet Aesop, who wrote the famous tales such as The Boy Who Cried Wolf and The Hare and the Tortoise that Kratos recounts to Atreus in the game. Another legendary Greek work that's mentioned in Ragnarok is the Iliad. Its existence implies that Homer exists in the God of War universe, although in this case his works are fictionalized versions of actual events, the Trojan War in this instance, which never actually happened in real history, but it did in God of War. This honestly brings up an interesting question. If the Iliad and the Trojan War both exist, does it mean that other Greek myths, as we know them, have been written as well? The stories of Heracles, Perseus, the creation myth, and so on. We see what actually happened in the games, and then retold into the actual myths that we have in the real world. So the myths inspire the games, and then the events in the games inspire the myths within the games. Does that make sense? It's pretty weird. This shield in Tyr's vault looks just like Alexander the Great's shield from the movie Alexander, and alludes that Alexander the Great exists in this universe. However, according to real-world legend, Alexander possessed the shield of Achilles from the aforementioned Iliad. So in this universe, it might just actually be Achilles' shield since he exists and not Alexander's, but it's probably Alexander's. In Ragnarok, Mimir brings up the legendary Battle of the Hot Gates, the famous confrontation between the Spartans and the Persians in 480 BC that is the central event of 300. Speaking of 300, Leonidas from that film is a playable character in Essential Multiplayer. He's obviously not canon to God of War and is based on a character from a film based on a graphic novel based on real life, but technically Leonidas I is a historic figure, so I'll give him a mention here. Last but not necessarily the least, or the most honestly, is one I personally had no idea about before researching for this video, the Eruption of Thera. It happened at approximately 1600 BC, so way before everything else covered in this video, and just like we see in the game, completely covered the Crete city of Heraklion in ash. Of course, as far as we know, Thera didn't have a titan inside of it. In fact, Thera is not a character at all in Greek myth. That was made up for the game, but such small accuracy oversights are not here nor there. What's even cooler is the fact that Atlantis sinking in wake of the eruption is not made up for God of War either. This is an actual historical assumption, specifically made by this dude, so most aspects of the scene are actually pretty accurate, except for the fact that Atlantis probably didn't exist. And that's pretty much every historic event or person I could find in God of War. If I missed something, tell me off in the comments, please. I'm genuinely interested. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.